Because of congestion issues, I don't favor taking down the tolls simply because I believe it will put more traffic on the Pike and it will put more cars in the city when we're already challenged to accommodate the traffic that we have.
And to her credit, my opponent has been very firm. She said we shouldn't take down tolls. Taking down tolls is not the direction we want to head. Taking down tolls is not in our long-term interests. She said she wants to expand tolls. She wants to put them back on the Western Pike, where Governor Weld took them down a number of years ago. I was very pleased to see Governor Patrick 2 weeks ago now say that in his revamp of the state's transportation system, it is his hope, and he was speaking first person, it is my hope that we can take down the tolls on the Massachusetts Turnpike, other than the ones at the state border. That is much closer to my position, take down all the tolls, than to my opponent's position, leave the ones we have, put them back on the Western Pike, and put them everywhere else. $175 million, it sounds like a big number. People say, well, there's $175 million collected, how would you replace that? But let's unpackage that. That's in the context of a $28.2 some odd billion state budget this year, billion. $175 million, I did just a little napkin scratching last night and thinking about this question. $175 million is 0.625% of that total budget. So it's less than 0.7% of that entire budget. To put it in real terms for people, if you take a family that makes $50,000 a year, the same percentage of their annual income would be $312. Now, as parents, if we were to find that $312 of our income was due to some wrong, such as, I don't know, we find out our kid is stealing other kids' lunch money to the tune of $312 a year, would the answer to that be, that's wrong, but until we figure out how to replace that 0.625% of our family revenue, you keep on doing that. We'll do a comprehensive review of our finances, and after that we'll decide how you can stop stealing lunch money. Of course not, and it's a silly example, but everyone says saddling east-west commuters with the entire debt burden of the Big Dig is wrong. But that's where they stop. They say it's wrong, but then they say, oh, we need to do another review. Or, oh, we're gonna enact a comprehensive reform next year and take care of that. In the meantime, our tolls keep getting hiked, as they must, because in order to pay these debt obligations, the Turnpike Authority Board is obligated to continue to increase our tolls. They will continue to increase. We're about to get them doubled. They will increase beyond that until we merge the Turnpike Authority into Mass Highway, eliminate it as a freestanding entity, absorb that debt payment, which is less than 0.625 of the entire state budget, and do away with the tolls, to do away with the ability of our legislature, which is dominated by people who don't live out here, to continue to saddle us with that burden and continue to kick the can down the road. I think our voters need someone who holds their interests paramount. Their interests, our interests.
Back to the original question about the cost benefit of merging the Mass Highway and the Turnpike Authority, the only cost savings that I have heard out of Dan seem to be related to tolls, which is a savings that we could get through improved technology without any merger of Mass Highway and the Turnpike Authority at all. And then my third point would be, to your point, David, which is Dan talking about absorbing the cost of removing the tolls, and that cost goes somewhere. And I've said all along that until you can be clear about where that cost is going to go, and I know a number of legislators currently in the State House have proposed a small gas tax increase in order to do just that, absorb this debt payment and make the payments while taking down the tolls. I think Dan needs to be honest with how exactly are we going to absorb that debt and what is the mechanism for that going to be.
When it snows, we know, living in this state, sometimes it'll snow like heck in Worcester and rain like heck in Boston. Because of union contracts that the Turnpike is saddled with, the Turnpike is unable to say it's snowing like heck in Worcester and we've got a whole bunch of plows in Boston standing by. They can't send those plows to Worcester to plow because of the contracts. They have to call in plow drivers from Worcester and pay them double time to plow instead of while they pay these guys to sit in their trucks and idle in the pouring rain. There are all kinds of inefficiencies like that. It's just that the system is, point me to inefficiencies in the Mass Turnpike system. To me, that's like, the reason I have a hard time answering the question is, the reality that I know, it's like standing on the beach and saying, no, tell me specifically, what's wet? Point out to something that's wet. It's inefficient. It's corrupt. It wastes money. And it ought to be eliminated. And the governor has proposed eliminating it. And I assume my opponent trusts that the governor has a way to deal with quote unquote lost revenues from that. He's proposed fundamental pension reform, which I'm glad to see. But this notion that, oh, we can't do that because there's no way, and again, I'll make the point, 0.625% of the state budget. If our state budget is operating in a way that it cannot find a way to compensate for 0.625%, without going back to the taxpayers' wallets in a different way, we've got some very serious problems here. And Carolyn's solution, she immediately goes to, maybe we ought to make it up with a gas tax increase. That's just saying, here, taxpayer, here's some money here, but...
Carolyn?
I stand by what I said, and the question originally was about merging the two authorities. I've heard a lot of inefficiencies. A couple of them related to tolls could be addressed without a merger, and should be before agreeing whether or not to support a merger. I want to see the numbers. I want to see specific savings. There have been suggestions made that while there may be some slim savings, there may be inefficiencies created in other areas through a merger. I just want to see the information before I, come out and commit one way or another.
And I just can't understand how someone runs for office in Metro West and takes as their first premise, well, you need to prove to me that eliminating the turnpike is a good thing. I'm going to assume it's not until you prove it. I just don't get that. That is not what I hear from the voters out here. And aside from my experience, I do know that it makes all the sense in the world to eliminate the Turnpike Authority. And the governor agrees now, and I'm glad to see that. I know, Carolyn, you're going to see the governor tomorrow. Maybe he can explain to you and convince you why it is that idea makes sense. I hope you'll ask him about it.
So you would support that even if it did, in fact, cost the state money through additional inefficiencies that were created?
I see absolutely no reason to think that it would cost the state money, but...
Have you seen the numbers to suggest that?
Yes, Carolyn, I've seen the numbers. I was just talking about it, but...
Well, I haven't heard numbers, though. I've heard anecdotal comments.
You referenced the
I'm
study
not sure you're listening, but...
You referenced the study from KPMG.
Well, it was a government study that KPMG helped with. It was conducted by the executive office of the governor. But the point being, I start from a premise that says our district, our region, is getting creamed to our detriment and to the benefit of the rest of the state. We ought to undo that. A surefire way to undo that is to eliminate the tolls. That's the only surefire way to do that. This kind of talk is what we get on Beacon Hill. This, well, we need to look at the numbers and we're going to have to do a review and let's lay it all out and kick the can down the road. And as that happens, the inevitable result of that, to say we need to wait longer and analyze more, is to say to our voters, you need to continue to pay higher and higher tolls, because that is what happens. That is what has to happen. Our tolls are about to double, and that has to happen because under the current situation, the Turnpike Authority is obligated to pay its debt obligations, and in order to do that, they need to double our tolls. The only way we're going to end that is to end the Turnpike Authority, roll that debt into make it an obligation of the Commonwealth, as it should have been to begin with.